All right, so this video is going to deal with learning targets 16 through 20 in Unit 5, which are going to focus on amphibians and reptiles. So amphibians are vertebrates, remember what vertebrates are, that live in water as larvae and on land as adults. They breathe through lungs as adults, although some will retain gills, and they have moist skin with mucus glands to help keep their skin moist. So what we're seeing here is animals beginning to transition from that water-only environment to some land environment, but some of the adaptations that allow them to do this is going to hinge around keeping their bodies moist and keep their skin from drying out. So the first amphibians were able to do two things, and both of these things are extremely important to life on land. Number one, breathe air. And this likely came from modified swim bladder that acted as a lung. The development of the lung is important for long-term survival on land, as well as a set of tissues to protect the lung from the ground. Number two, and also, this one's kind of overlooked a lot, but it's extremely important as well. Support themselves or be able to push themselves up out of the mud or off the ground. Forelimbs and support for them, the limb girdle, were necessary for this transition. So being able to push the body cavity up off the ground is a major adaptation for long-term survival on land. Think about it. You have your circulatory, organs, your lungs, all those things are in your body cavity. And if an organism is continually dragging itself across the rough ground without the proper protection, then damage will occur eventually, sometimes sooner, sometimes later, to those organs, which will lead to death. So organisms being able to push themselves up off the ground was a major adaptation for long-term success on our life on land instead of water. So limbs must be strong enough to hold the weight and move the organism. The lungs must be able to breathe air. The lung has high surface area for more oxygen intake. And skin of amphibians, mucous membranes that secrete mucus in order to protect the skin and allow diffusion across the skin, also keeps the skin from drying out. So feeding in amphibians. Larvae are usually herbivores, another vocab term there, whereas many adults are carnivores. They have long tongues, adapted for catching prey. Their digestive system is compartmentalized for the continual breakdown of food, which will maximize the nutrient absorption. Other organs produce materials that aid in digestion. So amphibians are really good about getting every bit of nutrients out of their food before it is turned into waste. Circulatory and respiration systems. With the respiration systems, again, in larvae, gas exchange happens on skin and gills, and in adults, they have lungs, but can also occur on the skin. Circulation, they have a double loop system. What a double loop system is, when we talk about the path of blood, okay, blood starts at the heart, then it's pumped to the lungs, then it's pumped back to the heart, then it's going to be pumped from the heart to the body to the heart. So a double loop system again. Heart, lungs, heart, body, heart. Okay. Unoxygenated blood, which means blood that does not have oxygen, is pumped to the lungs. That blood is going to pick up oxygen, and then it's going back to the heart. The oxygenated blood, or meaning the blood with oxygen, will then be pumped to the body to deliver the oxygen where it's needed, and unoxygenated blood will return back to the heart to keep this going, the double loop system. Excretion. They have kidneys for filtering waste. Urine is created from urea. I shouldn't say urea, take the S off, which is a chemical used to remove ammonia from the blood. Okay, they do have kidneys that act as a filter system for blood removing waste. Reproduction. They have external fertilization in most amphibians, and eggs must be laid in water. Metamorphosis is the changing of a larval amphibian into an adult. Think about tadpoles turning into a frog. Movement. Most larvae swim. Adults can run and walk, and adult frogs can jump long distances. So in amphibians, we see a lot of different forms of movement. So response, they have a well-developed nervous system. They have a protective membrane on the eyes to keep them from drying out. They use a tympanic membrane for hearing, which is similar to a human eardrum. It's just on the outside of the body of amphibians. Some amphibians also use a lateral line system, just like we saw in fish. So groups of amphibians. So you have salamanders, which most with 4 legs, and they mostly live in and around streams, really moist areas. Frogs and toads, they both have jumping abilities. Frogs are typically tied with water. They must stay moist. While toads are found in more places, don't necessarily need to stay moist. They've adapted ways to keep their bodies from dehydrating without keeping their skin moist. And then you have caecilians, which are legless amphibians, and they burrow in the sediment, and some have scales like fish. So then we move into reptiles. And these are vertebrates with dry, scaly skin and an amniotic egg. And that will be a vocab term that we'll talk about on the next slide. Reptiles are able to live their entire lives outside of water. Their skin provides protective layer to prevent water loss, and the skin doesn't grow, so must be shed. So the skin doesn't grow so much, so it must be shed so the reptile can grow. I did not word that bullet right. Long story short, with that last bullet, the skin doesn't grow with the reptile. It must be shed and new skin formed. Evolution. The first vertebrates these are the first vertebrates that were not dependent on water. Dinosaurs represent the most successful group of reptiles. Dinosaurs ranged from small to enormous in size. They ran on 2 or 4 legs, and some dinosaurs may have had feathers. A mass extinction event killed many of the dinosaurs, leaving room for other niches. This is where mammals came from. So, up until the Great Ice Age that killed off the dinosaurs, which you all know by now, reptiles were the dominating species of the earth. And mammals were very small, not allowed to grow very large, their primary food source. Once the ice age occurred, and we'll talk about some characteristics of reptiles, but they're not able to regulate their own body temperature. So when it got cold, it ended up killing a lot of them off. Mammals can regulate their own body temperature, and it allowed mammals to grow in size and complexity and fill other niches. So ectotherms, body temperature control. They cannot internally control their body temperature. Their behavior can directly affect their body temperature. You'll see a lot of reptiles laying out on rocks or logs somewhere directly in the sun to warm their bodies, and then they'll get in the shade to cool their bodies. They need external factors in order to regulate their body temperature. They can't do it internally. Ecto meaning outside. All right, so feeding. You see a wide range of feeding profiles in reptiles. Respiration, circulation, and excretion. So with respiration, they have spongy lungs, which means more surface area. They have a muscular chest cavity, which aids in the movement of air in and out of the lungs. Circulation, again, they have the double loop circulatory system we talked about a few slides ago. Excretion, they produce urine. Some reptiles contain a bladder that stores urine before it is expelled. Some reptiles should be convert ammonia into a solid waste in order to conserve water, which is something that we see in birds. So response system, similar to amphibians, except they have a more developed cerebrum, which is going to mean that we see more thinking in reptiles. They're active during the day with eyes able to see color. Snakes have a very good sense of smell. They have sensory organs in the mouth that can sense chemicals, hence why you see the tongue flicking. And some snakes can detect body heat. So with movement, they have strong limbs and rotate to support more weight. Reproduction, internal fertilization with oviparous and oviparous. The embryo is covered with membranes and leathery shells. An amniotic egg is an egg that can survive on land because of the protective membrane and shells. Okay, before this, we saw eggs that had to be laid in water. These eggs can be laid on land. Classifications of reptiles: you have lizards and snakes, and they have highly specialized senses. Crocodilians, long snouts, and they watch over their young after hatching, which increases the chances of survival. Turtles and tortoises. Turtles are found around water. Tortoises are found around land. They have a protective shell made as part of the skeleton. And tutaras resemble lizards. They have primitive scales and a third eye on top of the brain. And that is the end of this rather long video presentation. Be sure you complete the video form that goes with this. And if you have questions, let me know. Thank you.